Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is Election Edge Wednesday show. 6 o'clock on the East Coast, 3 o'clock out west. Been another tough day in America, folks. We witnessed another shooting, four deceased in Georgia, 9 wounded. Um, we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show because I know you're watching this show to tune in what's happening in the political arena. So I'd like to welcome Tony Lyons into the show with me today. Tony, you've got a background of Sky House Publishing, and you founded, make sure I get this right, American Values Co-founder 2024. Happy to have you on Election Edge with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So Tony, let me ask you a question. I mean, we originally, before this news broke, you and I had talked about that. We wanted to talk about the impact of Kennedy supporting Trump because it's been a little bit of time has passed right now. Polling's all over the map, and we'll get into that a little bit later in the show. But you had some opinions on this because, again, that was a big step for Kennedy to drop out and support Trump. What have you seen among those swing states? Has it been a positive for Trump? Has it been neutral? Give me your thoughts because I've seen very, very limited polling data that really even addresses it.
Yeah, it is really hard to tell, this far what the impact is, but I think that we're all going to see in the long run that this decision of Bobby Kennedy to endorse Donald Trump is a game changer both for Donald Trump and for Bobby Kennedy. And for Bobby Kennedy, it's about getting out the messages of the things that he really cares about and the things that he wants to help do for this country. And he believes that he can get that done with Donald Trump and that there's no way that he could get it done in any other way. So I think that it really does wind up helping Donald Trump and that Bobby Kennedy brings millions of voters with him. And there's been a lot of polling done in the last 6 months that shows clearly that many of the people who support Bobby Kennedy didn't vote in 2016 or in 2020 because they don't trust the government. They don't think that the process is fair. And they've seen that, how Bobby's been treated by the DNC, that the process, definitely isn't fair. And they see that the DNC rigged the primaries, rigged the media, set up, hit pieces and, all kinds of, deprecating things said about him throughout the entire process. Then they rigged the debate process, the ballot access process, the polling. They were suing him in 11 states when he, pulled out to endorse Trump. And they were teed up to sue him in what looks like 18 more states. So, clearly they say they care about the democratic process, but there's no evidence to prove that. And the truth is they want to destroy democracy, win at all costs, and take down Donald Trump.
Oh, there's no question about it. You've seen the lawfare in full display here. Uh, we'll get into it a little bit here about what they did with the Russians today, but sticking on Kennedy for just a minute, his name is on the ballot in 3 states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina, and he's actually having a sue to try to get his name off the ballot. I mean, if that's not one of the craziest things I've ever heard. Now, in one state, I can't remember if it's Michigan or Wisconsin, there is clearly state law against Kennedy on that says if your name is on the ballot by August, I believe, 4th, you can't change that. And in that particular state, there's like 8 candidates' names on the ballot. But Tony, what do you make about the fact that an individual who was running now does not want to run? He's having to sue to get his name off the ballot when the Democrats were trying to prevent him from ever getting on the ballot. I mean, this
Sure.
seems like lawfare just gone haywire.
Yeah, they were fighting tooth and nail to keep him off the ballot in as many states as they could keep him off. And, now they're fighting to try to keep him on. So, they don't care a bit about democracy. They just care about winning. And, they're willing to take down the whole system to do that. And, what we've seen with the censorship that they were willing to endorse and promote throughout the whole process, to try to control what big tech companies let on their platforms. And, there's a federal judge in one of the big cases where Bobby Kennedy sued Biden, who said that, that the censorship of Bobby Kennedy and of other people over the last couple of years is the worst case of censorship in the history of the United States. That from the day Biden got into power, he started censoring people who disagreed with him, vilifying them, using propaganda, deplatforming them in any way that he could. So, that's the end of democracy when that happens. So I think that Bobby Kennedy's decision shows that he really cares about the things that he describes, when he's on all these different shows. So what he talks about is really caring about children's health, ending chronic disease, getting out of the foreign wars, and ending censorship to protect free speech in this country, because you can't have democracy without free speech. And so he believes that he can do those things with Donald Trump. And I believe that he's right.
Tony, what states of those 7 swing states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, which of those states can Kennedy have the greatest impact? Because polling has shown all 7 of those states extremely close in most polls. There's some outliers out there, like CNN came out and had Harris up 5 or 6 points in a couple of them. I don't believe those. The polling has traditionally been mishandled, Republicans undersampled. I mean, there's a litany of problems with some of those polls, but generally speaking, plus or minus Harris Trump 1 point. And by the way, that's what the internal polls of the various respective campaigns are showing, not what these public polls are. So, Tony, of those 7 states, which ones do you think Kennedy can have the most impact in assisting President Trump?
Well, I'd just sort of like to say first that I think that we need to look at what happened with the polling with Bobby Kennedy. That, 8 weeks back, he was polling in, the 12% as high as 19% range. And then suddenly he just kind of nosedived. And we were getting reports from people who were being called by pollsters who were just leaving Bobby Kennedy out. And then they were doing compilations of polls. So then, in poll after poll, Bobby Kennedy got 0 because the pollster didn't ask the respondent whether they wanted to vote for Bobby Kennedy. So there were all these polls where he got 0%. And then if in one poll he got 19%, they recorded it as something like, 4% or 5% because they included all the polls that he got 0% in. So there's just been this rampage of fake polling in this country. So I would discount much of what's been publicized in the last week or two. And I think that it's likely that Trump is doing much better than this kind of fake polling shows.
So think about what you're saying, Tony. First, he tries to win the nomination and they rig the process against him. Then they try to, on the polling that's been taking place from when he's been in, they've tried to eliminate him from even being a factor in the polling when we know effectively that he is. We know that they did not want him to endorse Trump. And now, a fourth item, they're trying to keep him on ballots where he wants to get off of them. I mean, if this is not an example of a party, again, you use the term, they only care about winning. They don't care about democracy. And I think it came into clear focus. It's been in clear focus ever since Harris took over from Biden and the palace coup that took place. But again, Tony, this just reemphasizes this point where the Democratic Party, they cannot run on their record. Their record is atrocious. No matter how they try to prop themselves up, it doesn't work. And we're starting to see that now in policy positions of the presidential nominee, Kamala Harris. But before we get into her policy positions, right on cue, Tony, we saw it in 2020. We saw it in 2016. What does the Justice Department do today? They see a very close race with virtually no evidence at all. And even if there is a little bit of evidence, most of the public is not going to believe it based upon historical trends. But they come out today and they say, well, we've arrested 2 Russian nationals who are interfering in the presidential election, trying to help Donald Trump. You and I both know that is absurd on his face. The Russians would like nothing better than to have Kamala Harris in the White House because they know that they can control her. Look, when Trump was president, there was no invasion of Ukraine. Trump seemed to get along well with the Russian leader. I mean, we didn't have these issues like we have right now. And now, all of a sudden, we're what, 60 days out from presidential election, Russian interference. Tony, right on cue, right out of the Department of Justice.
Yeah, and they've been playing these games now for years, and Bobby Kennedy's been great about it. I mean, when the DNC tried to keep Donald Trump off the ballot in Maine and in Colorado, Bobby Kennedy came right out on his X channel saying that he didn't want to win an election based on shutting his opponent down, based on keeping them off the ballot, based on censorship or propaganda. And this is just propaganda. I mean, we've seen this time after time that there's Russian interference, there's something else getting in the way. But the truth is that this is election interference. When you make a statement like that, when you don't have real facts, that's interfering with the democratic process in the same way that trying to keep somebody off the ballot is, or trying to not have debates, or any of these various processes that have been used to end democracy in America. And I think that one of the things Bobby Kennedy wants to do, and that Donald Trump has to do, is to call this out time after time, that this is not how we do things in America. This is how things go in Russia or in China or in banana republics, but it's not supposed to happen here.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on that, Tony. And real quick, before we move on, talk a little bit about your two businesses. Skyhorse, talk to me about that. It's a great name. I love the name. Tell me about Skyhorse Publishing and what does it do?
Yeah, Skyhorse publishes something like 400 books per year now. And, many of the books we have coming out in the next, few weeks are connected to the election. One of them is by Dinesh D'Souza, and it's called, let's see, well, it's called Vindicating Trump. And it's just available now for pre-order. And then we're doing a book by Melania Trump called Melania. And we're doing a book by Jack Posobiec called Bulletproof. That's all about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So, we've got a whole raft of books coming out that tie into what's going on in the next month or two. But we've been publishing books that are censored or, deplatformed or by people who have been sort of blacklisted or canceled in some way. And that's a big part of what we've done for the last 15 years.
Well, Tony, after the show, we need to get you on with Mark and get you on patriottv.store, and we'll get your books listed there because you've got some great authors on that list. How about, you were talking about American values. Tell me about that. You co-founded that in 2024, this year.
Yeah, so we really believed, there was a whole group of us, and we felt that Bobby Kennedy's voice really needed to be heard. And he's been censored, on and off for the last decade, where the DNC and where many other people have been trying to control what people do, what they think, what they read, what drugs they put into their bodies, whether they take vaccines or don't take vaccines. And that's been happening so much to Bobby Kennedy. And part of the reason is that he's gone up against some of the most powerful people in the United States, some of the most powerful, greedy, corrupt people. And when you do that in this country that is, rapidly turning into an oligarchy, they come down on you in all kinds of ways. And so, he brought more than 500 lawsuits to clean up the Hudson River, which he was incredibly successful at, to fight Monsanto and Dow Chemical for creating products that had poisons in them and toxins, to help get mercury out of vaccines, to protect children's brains, to protect free speech, all of those kinds of things, just hundreds and hundreds of lawsuits. And he really believed that even though he was winning most of these big lawsuits, that he couldn't really impact the country to the extent that he wanted to and that he felt needed to be done. So he thought the only way to do that is to get on the public stage. So we founded this super PAC to help him get on the public stage so he could actually have an impact in these areas that are so critical to the future of the United States.
Tony, that is great. And I really commend the work on that, not only on the publishing business, but on the super PAC and your efforts to stick with what you believe in. And that's really important. All right, we're going to take our first break, but when we come back, we're going to talk a little more about Kennedy's impact, and we're going to talk about the current state of the race right now. And we're going to walk you through some of the misleading information that the mainstream and legacy media is trying to get in your head. We'll be back in 90 seconds or so.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store, a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
And we're back. Folks, if you haven't noticed, the stock market's taken quite a stumble over the last couple of days. Like our sponsorship, Dr. Kirk Elliott said, diversify, get a little bit of your portfolio into gold. And Kirk Elliott Precious Metals is a big time supporter of Patriot TV. So pick up the phone, give them a call, 720-605-3900. They're great patriots at Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. All right, Tony, we're back. Listen, we've had some really sort of bizarre stuff happen over the last 2 days relative to Republicans who are voting for Harris and Democrats that are voting for Trump. I mean, we had the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, come out and say he's not voting for Trump. He ran with him and won back in 16, ran with him in 20 and lost. We have Liz Cheney, no shock there whatsoever, saying she's voting for Kamala Harris. And yet we have Tim Walz's family, who's on the ticket to be vice president. His family's voting for Trump. I mean, Tony, that's very anecdotal, 3 people, but what does it tell you about the state of affairs as we head in 60 days to go?
Yeah, and then of course we have Bobby Kennedy, coming out to endorse Trump, and Tulsi Gabbard, and many other lifelong Democrats coming out to endorse Trump. And then, what you have to look at when you think about Kamala Harris is that she kind of came out of nowhere. She was a vice president who was dragging down the president. Her numbers were lower than Joe Biden's polling numbers. So she then suddenly comes out as this candidate who hasn't explained what her policies are, who hasn't done any interviews, who hasn't done any debates, who hasn't put up any policy on her website, and suddenly she's polling really well. And you have to wonder what's going on. I mean, this looks to me like one of the biggest propaganda campaigns in the history of American politics, where we have this candidate where nobody knows anything about them, and the things that they've said publicly don't really make sense. So Kamala Harris talks about equality of opportunity not being good enough. What we need in this country is equality of result. So, no serious person could have that point of view. So she obviously doesn't even know what those words mean. So you think about that. This is a presidential candidate who doesn't feel comfortable giving an interview, telling us what her policies are, and yet comes out with these statements that just don't make any sense at all.
Well, let me give you a couple of them to segue into what you were just talking about. Economically, about 10 days ago, she came out with that Marxist idea of price controls on food that was so widely panned, they don't even talk about it anymore. I mean, even Ro Khanna, who is on the left-leaning side of the equation, congressman from California, said, no, we're not going to do anything like that. Kevin O'Leary, Shark Tank fame, talked about her plan to give $25,000 to first-time home buyers. Said that all that's going to do is fuel more inflation in an already overheated housing market. And then this idea that people over $1 million of income were going to have to pay capital gains on unrealized gains. Ro Khanna went on CNBC, Friendly Business Channel, and said, no, that's a terrible idea. This is a very prestigious Democrat saying this. Well, lo and behold, a day after Ro Khanna says that, just today, the vice president comes out and announces, Tony, that she not only is going to be supporting a capital gains tax rate, albeit higher, but significantly lower than what Joe Biden is presenting. Biden wanted a 45% long-term capital gains rate. Meaning, folks, if you own an asset more than 1 year and you sell it, you have a gain. Example, you gain $100,000. Well, under Biden's plan, you pay $45,000 of that in taxes. Under Harris's plan, you would only pay $28,000 in tax, and to pay the $28,000, you'd have to earn over $1 million a year. So she effectively said, if you earn less than $1 million, I'm not even going to propose increasing the long-term capital gains tax rate. I mean, Tony, that sounds like a Republican. I mean.
Well, she's just trying to say things there that she thinks people want her to say, but she's also doubled down on some of her crazy ideas from the past. And one of those is to tax people on unrealized capital gains, which is such a shift from the last 100 years of taxation in the United States, that it just doesn't make any sense at all. And the idea that that's not on the front page of major newspapers is kind of shocking, and shows you that you just can't really get honest news in this country. So it is a striking thing that you've got a candidate who, with this fake polling, is doing so well, where we have no idea who she really is. All of her statements are contradictory. She talks about how much she loves, Biden's fiscal policy, the Bidenomics policies of the last 3.5 years. But then she also says that she recognizes that it isn't working, that people are actually doing badly. So, there's just no logic there. And it's so clear that Biden's policies haven't worked, and that the poor are kind of getting poorer, that 35% of the population now doesn't make enough money to pay for their basic needs, that credit card debt is up, $400 billion in the last couple of years, and that credit card rates have gone from an average of something like 15% to an average of 22%. So this is not a good country now for the middle class to live in. And she's, on the one hand, saying that they did a great job, and on the other hand, telling us that she's going to rescue us from her own bad policies.
Oh, you're right about that. And effectively, this is the This is the makeover of the sitting vice president who, okay, I'll accept the fact that the vice president doesn't set policy. That comes from the president. But when you make the argument, hey, I was the last person in the room with Biden, even though we know she wasn't on most major decisions, we'll accept the fact that she said that, knowing it's not true. And amazingly, now she's adopted basically Donald Trump's policy on building the wall, tighter security at the border, prosecuting people that come over, while we've let 10 to 12 million illegals come across during the Biden-Harris administration. She came out previously, we showed it all the time on this show, on that Dave McCormick classic video, how she was for Medicare for all. Not anymore. That's a policy shift too. So you're right, there's nothing on the webpage. During the time of this campaign, once the conventions were over, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have done 37 sit-down interviews. 37. She's done one. So, Tony, it looks to me, again, the same people running this campaign now were the ones that ran the Biden campaign in 2020. So even though he quit, the fact he assigned basically his campaign staff to her, they're basically employing the same tricks that Biden used before, and they're trying to trick the electorate into thinking that Donald Trump is the incumbent and she's the challenger. And I will tell you this, Tony, I mean, I don't agree with it, but I would make this argument for all my fellow Republican friends. It has been somewhat effective just based upon how this race is shaping up. Now, again, I'm not suggesting that she's ahead of Trump, because I think in the swing states, Trump is ahead. But the fact that this race is even close, when we've let in 10 to 12 million illegal immigrants, crime has soared in a lot of these communities. Venezuelan gangs take over apartments in Denver. New York City has to spend $5 billion on illegal immigrant crime in New York. And I could go on and on. 20% inflation since Biden and Harris took office. And yet, Tony, this race is effectively in a statistical tie, definitely a tie in the swing states. I mean, what do you make of this makeover, what they're trying to do with her?
Yeah, it's just the use of censorship and propaganda has just been perfected. And like you said, this is the same team, the same Biden playbook, where they hired people like Liz Smith to go after third-party candidates, to try to keep people off the ballot, to try to have no debate, all of that sort of stuff. But, and then you look at somebody like Bobby Kennedy, and it's true of Donald Trump too. Bobby Kennedy goes on shows every single day, often, 8 to 10 shows a day. He's out there telling the American people, what he believes, what his policies are, what he would do if he became president, or, if Trump puts him now in a position where he can influence policy. And we don't know anything about Kamala Harris. She's, either saying nothing, or she's got a team of people trying to figure out what people want to hear in specific age groups or demographics, and they're kind of trying to turn it into a science. But every bit of it just is not sincere. Whereas Bobby Kennedy, he's got this lifetime of showing his honesty, his sincerity, his integrity, his moral courage. And it was a tough decision for him to come out and endorse Trump and try to have a unity party to try to heal the country at a time when it needs it more than at any time since the Civil War. And then, you have somebody like Kamala Harris who, wants to brag that she worked at McDonald's when, Bobby Kennedy's coming out and saying that, we have a chronic health disease problem in this country. We have childhood obesity. We have all of these sort of this war on children that's been taking place in this country. And McDonald's is a part of that. Nothing wrong with going to McDonald's. But people often don't know that, as Bobby Kennedy says, that the processed foods are leading to these childhood problems, to this obesity, chronic disease, the food colorings, the seed oils, the pesticides, the 1,000 chemicals that are in foods in this country and not in other countries all around the world. So Donald Trump is coming out, and he's kind of learning with Bobby Kennedy what's going on and has said that he wants to make that a big part of, his second term. And Kamala Harris is doing nothing. She's only saying things that she thinks might work. And Bobby Kennedy and then Donald Trump, by extension, are saying that we have to learn to love our children and our children's health more than we hate each other.
Let me have a quick question, Tony, before we go to break. Where would you like to see, assuming Trump wins, what type of role would you like to see Kennedy have in a Trump administration?
Yeah, so I think some of the comments that Trump has made make a lot of sense. That, Bobby Kennedy should have a big role, and I'm not sure what that role would be, but some big role in the CDC and in the FDA and potentially in the EPA, and then definitely on a commission on assassinations so that he could look at the assassination of his father and of his uncle and the attempted assassination of Donald Trump and tell the truth to the American public. We've all been waiting a long time to get to the truth. And, nobody's really tried. And Bobby Kennedy's ready to try. And Donald Trump has said he's going to let him do it.
There's a lot of Americans want to know answers to those questions. All right, we're going to take a break now. We'll be back in 90 seconds. And stick with us, folks. We've got some really good stuff on the other side of the break.
Don't let them win. Patriot TV is committed to delivering the truth. America's new network for patriots is growing fast, and we'd love you to join us as a member of Patriot TV. Your support makes it possible for us to continue to deliver unbiased reporting, thought-provoking discussions, and insights you won't find anywhere else. From in-depth interviews to behind-the-scenes footage, Patriot TV brings you closer to the voices shaping our nation's future. Whether it's political developments, cultural shifts, or global affairs, Patriot TV keeps you informed and empowered. As a member of Patriot TV, you'll get perks like personal invitations to exclusive Patriot TV events, where you can gather and network with like-minded Americans. We'll also host online events throughout the year with General Flynn, who's committed to host live Q&A webinars where callers like you can ask him questions and get real answers. Access to these events will be members only, so go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. We have a great membership option starting at just $9.99 a month, or save with our annual membership for only $99, or take advantage of the best value, the 2-year membership for just $159. Go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. Do your part to make sure the truth gets out to all patriots and help ensure future programming. Become a member today. Just go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member, join today.
And we're back. Hey, Tony, I want to pick up on something you were just talking about a little while ago, the debt that Americans have taken on. And you mentioned that credit card rates are up to 22%. An additional $400 billion has been piled onto credit card debt, which both those are true. Folks, here's the astounding thing. The total credit card debt Americans owe right now is $1.1 trillion. That is an enormous, enormous sum of money. As we mentioned last Friday in the anecdotal story, when Ronald Reagan was asked how high it would take $1,000 bills to equal $1 trillion, and he guessed 67 miles, it's actually 81 miles. That's a lot of debt. That is a tremendous amount of debt. Now, the Federal Reserve has come out, and their beige book came out, and they said the U.S. economy right now, Tony, it's either stagnant or heading towards a slowdown, possible recession. Now, will that come soon enough for people to recognize it? I think, Tony, a lot of Americans already feel this economy is in a recession. They're feeling it based upon their inability to borrow to buy a house, their staggering credit card payments, their wages not keeping up with inflation. And I think that's why Donald Trump has an edge economically in most polling that shows him favorable related to immigration and the economy. Tony, will that be enough to sway this election to Trump? If it boils down to an issue election, can the inflation, the economy, and immigration pull Trump over the finish line?
Well, so one of the problems is getting the truth, in this country now. So it's really hard for people to comprehend the statistics that they're sort of that are put in front of them every single day. So you don't see things now. Like there's one stat that I read about just a couple of days ago, which is that in the last 2 years, the number of people below the poverty level in the United States has gone up by 12%. So, that ought to tell people that the current administration that includes Kamala Harris, and with policies that she was part of, that she endorsed, that she went on television and extolled the virtues of, that these policies have failed. And I think that millions of Americans see that. Maybe they're not showing up in the polling because it's not real polling. But the problem is that if you're given all of this fake information, and if you're told things about Donald Trump that aren't true, you're told things about Bobby Kennedy that aren't true, how do you know what the facts are? So that's what makes it difficult. And so it's really hard to know how this pans out. But if you look at 2020, Donald Trump lost by 45,000 votes in 3 states. I don't think there's any way you can look at the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy as bringing fewer than a couple of million votes, and probably many more. And like I said, many of the Bobby Kennedy voters don't really show up in polling because they're not political people. And they've said clearly that they didn't vote in 2016 or in 2020, and that if it wasn't for Bobby Kennedy, they wouldn't vote in 2024. Those people now, seeing that Donald Trump is going to give Bobby Kennedy, going to make him part of his transition team, going to, look at the ideas that he has and, give Bobby an opportunity to be a part of his administration. Many of those millions of outsiders are going to come into the fold and are going to wind up voting for Donald Trump. And I think that that's why Donald Trump is going to wind up winning by a fairly wide margin.
Tony, I hope you're right about that. And if I just go through the numbers about what you said, let's operate under the assumption that before Kennedy endorsed Trump, he was getting 6 to 7% of the vote. I think that's probably a fair number. It had been somewhere around the 10 to 12% range after Biden dropped out. Some of those Kennedy voters disappeared. Some of them went for Harris. But I would surmise this to you. Of the 6% of Kennedy voters that were going to go for him, I would guess, and I would like to hear whether you agree or disagree with me on this, 4 out of those 6 will go to Trump. 1 may go to her, 1 may not vote. But if those percentages played out, you're talking about a 3 to 4 point swing. And in most national polls right now, Tony, from a conservative number, Real Clear Politics, about 1.8%, to the Hill, which is about 4%, let's call it 2%, somewhere in between, 2.5 is probably what our lead is. If you factor in those Kennedy supporters, you basically have a dead heat race. And one thing that the pollsters for Scott Rasmussen's organization pointed out, the Kennedy voters, like you said, and some Trump voters, they are very difficult to poll because they don't show up in your roster of necessarily people who have voted before.
Right.
They don't want to tell they don't want to tell pollsters how they really feel. And there's a lot of them that basically said, F you, I'm voting for Trump. So what do you make of this, what I call this stealth support that I think Trump is going to get from those Trump voters that don't want to speak to pollsters and the Kennedy voters that they're just flat out missing or trying to make disappear?
Yeah, so I think that, Bobby Kennedy's numbers were likely much higher before the fake polling kind of kicked in. And then what happened is when millions of people see polling that's that low, when they see it go from 12% or 15% down to 3 or 4, then they think, oh, well, he's just a spoiler. He doesn't have any opportunity to actually win. And if he can't win, then people start to think, well, should I vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? So then his numbers that from fake polling might have gone from 12% to 8%, then go down to 6% or 5% or even less. So your question of whether at 6%, Bobby is able to bring 4% to Donald Trump. I think that it winds up being most of the people. Whatever the number is, I would think Bobby brings 80% of those people with him. And the reason is very simple, that Bobby Kennedy's policies boil down to three really important areas. And one of them is children's health / chronic disease. One of them is getting us out of these foreign wars, specifically the Ukraine war. And then the other one is censorship and free speech. And I think that anybody who cares about any of those three things recognizes clearly that Kamala Harris is terrible on those issues. And there is nothing that she will do other than make those things worse, other than make children's health worse, get us into more wars, and, weaponize words like misinformation to curtail free speech going forward, like her team has done for the last 3.5 years. So I do think Bobby Kennedy brings those people, and that they will be the game changer that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I think 80%. I believe that's the correct number. If it's anywhere from 2/3 to 80%, again, I think on the popular vote, that's going to close the popular vote. And just the way the electoral college is set up, Donald Trump, if he comes within 2 points of Harris, he is going to win this election in the electoral college. And let me explain that. In 2016, Trump got 46% of the vote. In 2020, he got 47% of the vote. All right, so other candidates that are still in the race, the Jill Steins, the Cornel West, handful of others, they will likely garner 2% of the vote. Maybe Stein gets 1% from the Greenies, West gets 0.75%, 0.25% goes to miscellaneous other candidates. Like we told you earlier in the show, in Michigan and Wisconsin, there's like 8 to 10 candidates on the ballot. So that leaves 98% of it up for grabs. If Trump increases his vote total to 48%, that would mean Harris would get 50, he'd get 48, others would come in with 2. Under that scenario, we will have an electoral college landslide for Donald Trump. Now, there's no guarantee it's going to get there, and this is just the opinion of Election Edge, but our basis is this. When he defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016, he won those 3 blue wall states, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and he won the southern states too, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina. So then we fast forward to 2020, he wins North Carolina, but he loses the blue wall and loses those other states by, as Tony mentioned, a very, very slim margin. So where are we today? If you add in those Kennedy voters or a fraction of them that will support Trump, you factor in some of the polling that they don't pick up Trump voters. A good example, Pennsylvania. You think the Amish are getting polled? No, they don't even have phones. 80% of them are going to vote for Trump. So I think that may explain a lot of it. And again, speaking of Amish in Pennsylvania, Tony, I believe that Pennsylvania is the key state. Whoever wins that state, I believe, will be our 47th president. Your thoughts on Pennsylvania? Is that the key? And when you factor in all these pieces here, can Trump win this election getting 48% of the vote? Is my theory, does it have some credence to it?
I definitely think that it does, and what we're seeing in this country now is an incredible realignment where it's really not about the Democratic Party versus the Republican Party. It's about people who believe in certain things, people who have certain values, certain constitutional values. So it's not anymore about left or right. It's about right or wrong for many, many people. And I think that you're going to see an historic number of people crossing party lines because they look at the Democratic Party, even if it's their own party, even if they voted for that party for their whole life. And, that I think is really going to be true in a state like Pennsylvania, where they're going to say, these people don't have the values that I do. They don't care about the things that I do. These are pro-war people. These are pro-censorship people. These are people who don't care about the middle class. These are people who don't care about our children. and are part of this kind of war on children. And I think that that really affects Midwestern states where people are kind of moderates and they say, this is an extreme party. This is a party that has nothing to do with the Democratic Party values that John F. Kennedy or Robert Kennedy had 60 years ago. That those two people, would have believed strongly in Bobby Kennedy's message, that they would have been proud of him for standing up to these incredibly powerful and corrupt people, doing the same kinds of things they were trying to do when they stood up to the CIA, when they stood up to the mafia and the unions. So they were in the same kind of battles. And this is a time when those battles are taking place. And I think you're going to see more and more Democrats, more and more people who back Bobby Kennedy switching over to Donald Trump and recognizing that this is such an important time and that they have to look at what the outcome of their decision is going to be.
I agree with you 100% on that. And I would say that just to close it out before we take a break, this party of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it has gone so far left. It makes Barack Obama's Democratic Party look like a center-left party. It makes Bill Clinton's Democratic Party look downright conservative. And Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy wouldn't even recognize the current Democratic Party. I mean, it's gone that far to the left, folks. All right, we're going to take our final break, but when we come back, we have some additional issues overseas that the Democratic Party is just going further and further left and really embarrassing the United States. Be back in 90 seconds.
Attention business owners, are you ready to advertise to millions of loyal patriots ready to buy your products or services? Here's your golden opportunity to advertise with Mark Schaftlein. When you advertise on Election Edge, you've aligned your company with a trusted voice and connected with an audience that shares your values. Mark hosts the exciting new live show that delves into every facet of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, offering insightful analysis, expert interviews, and up-to-the-minute coverage of the key events and developments throughout the election season. When you advertise on Election Edge, you're aligning your brand with integrity, loyalty, and a dedication to truth. Mark's audience is passionate, conservative, and committed to the values your business stands for. When given the choice, Mark's followers will buy your product or service over other woke companies. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your brand with the power of Patriot TV. Reach out to us today at advertise@patriot.tv.
Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. For more than 10 years, Patriot Mobile has been committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile.
And we're back. Tony, earlier we mentioned the fact that right on cue, 60 days before the election, Merrick Garland and the Justice Department accused Vladimir Putin of ordering Russian interference on U.S. elections. Let me see. Haven't we heard this? Oh, we heard it in 2020. We heard it in 2016. Tony, why in the world would Vladimir Putin want to have Donald Trump back in the White House, given he's had such a free reign in Ukraine with Joe Biden? I mean, that's point number one, which I want you to address. Point number two, the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party, sure enough, right on cue, right when students go back to school, it's not just Columbia University, it's other places. Tony, the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party and Merrick Garland, what do you make of this? I mean, more of the same disinformation, at the maximum.
Donald Trump was trying to get us out of wars. Bobby Kennedy wants to get us out of wars. Trump is a deal maker. We all know that. We want somebody in the White House who's a deal maker, who can make good deals for the country. And we've seen what Biden does. Biden screwed up the entire deal making possibility with the Saudis, with the Russians, with the Chinese, with Brazil, with India, who have all now joined forces and work to make the currency of the world something other than the dollar, for the first time in the last half a century. So, this is the kind of deal making we've been getting, and it's really dangerous. And so the idea that Donald Trump would be more favorable to Vladimir Putin is, not at all based on reality. Donald Trump would work to make the best deals he could make for the people of the United States of America. And that, I think, is very clear. So, all of these kinds of things, all of these, the real misinformation is not what we're told it is. It's anytime you hear something is sort of a Russian scheme, that's been used for the last 50 years to sort of pull on people's heartstrings, to kind of control their brains by saying anything you don't like is some kind of a Russian scheme. And, that's a scare tactic. It's a fear tactic, and people shouldn't let it work on them.
I don't think it will work on them. I mean, it may be catnip to all the left-wing radical Democrats that are already supporting Harris. Trump, bad orange man, he's Putin's guy, etc. I'm not buying that for a New York second. I just think it's just more of an effort by the Biden administration, Merrick Garland in particular, to go out there and try to confuse the electorate, throw things against the fence, see what's going to stick. I mean, to me, it's just another futile attempt to take Trump down. And I think you're not going to peel off Trump's voters from him. And if they're trying to appeal to that sliver of 6 to 7% of undecided voters in the 7 swing states, good luck with that strategy. I don't think it's going to work. Now, turning to Israel, I really believe this, Tony. I think if Trump wins, that war will stop over in the Middle East. I think Trump will reach out with a phone call to the Iranians and basically tell them, you give the Israelis the hostages back or else. And I think Trump will be effective because he was effective before. The Israelis already see how weak and feeble Biden is. Now, as weak and feeble as Biden is, Harris would be worse because she has openly criticized Netanyahu for how he's handling this war, despite the fact they've tried to do everything they can to eliminate Hamas so it's not a threat to the Israeli people. And it's not just Hamas that's the threat. They've got missiles targeted from Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've got the Iranians funneling money into all these activities. And Tony, I just think that Harris has come out basically and not said it directly, but she's inferred that if she wins, the relationships with Israel will go even further to the left.
Yeah, I mean, I think that historically what you see is that weak leaders tend to exaggerate. They tend to overcompensate, and they tend to get you into more wars because they don't comprehend deterrence. I mean, we should certainly be willing to go to war for things that are really critical and to make a stand when a stand needs to be made. But, we also need a leader who we can trust. And we need a team of people in the White House who are going to be willing to negotiate, who are going to be willing to reach across party lines and, reach out to foreign leaders and, really work things out with them and try to do things that are best for this country, try to find ways to explain them as being good for the other country in the same kind of way that John F. Kennedy did in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So you don't come out and say, like Joe Biden did, that we might have to assassinate Putin or threaten to blow up the Russian pipeline and then claim that you didn't do it. all of those kinds of things. I mean, the real misinformation stories are stories like the Biden laptop. That was a true story, and that at the very end, right before the election, that's something that was clearly going to hurt Joe Biden was turned into something that hurt Donald Trump. And it hurt Donald Trump because it sounded like it was another, of course, Russian disinformation scheme, and that maybe Donald Trump was part of it. But we know the truth now. We know these games. We've seen them before, and we can't fall for them this time around. So people have to hold tough and recognize that they're going to be inundated with lies and propaganda, and they should look at the fact that you have somebody like Bobby Kennedy who you can really trust, and he's going to work hard with Donald Trump to try to set this country on a better course, to make people healthy once again, to protect free speech. He's going to fight for you. He's going to fight for the American public. And we've seen that the Democrats aren't going to do that they don't care. They just want to win. They don't care about free speech. They're getting us into more wars. They don't care about chronic disease. I mean, these people do not care about any of your viewers. They care about themselves and perpetuating their own corruption.
News broke today, Tony, that the Harris campaign has finally agreed to all the terms of the debate coming up on September 10th, which is less than a week away. All right, we got 2 minutes left. What would you recommend Trump emphasize? I know he's being coached by Kennedy and by Tulsi Gabbard, who's actually, I think, playing the role of Kamala Harris. 2 minutes left, Tony. What would you recommend Trump focus on in this most critical upcoming debate?
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't think that he needs to attack Harris as much as he has to outline, what his policies would actually be. I think that Kamala Harris, basically can't say a coherent sentence, and that he should let her explain herself to the public, which I don't think she's capable of doing. And so we don't want viewers to feel sorry for her because she's being attacked. We want viewers to hear clearly what her policies are, because I don't think she has any policies that make any sense. And that if you let her speak and you let her say things like, we need to envision a future unburdened by the past, or, which I guess means that we're going to get rid of all Western values and Western jurisprudence and all of the wisdom that went into bringing us to where we are now. Clearly, we have problems in this country and all around the world, but there's a lot of good too. There's a lot of wisdom that we don't want to throw away. And so clearly she would like to throw that all, into the garbage bin of history. And then she wants us, like I started out by saying, she wants equality of result. That sounds a lot. It doesn't only sound like communism. It actually is communism. So if she's allowed to express herself, I think she will explain to the American public why they don't want to vote for her.
Tony Lyons, it's been a pleasure having you on Election Edge today. Your thoughts were valuable. I hope you'll come back and see us. Very much enjoyed our conversation today. Folks, we'll be back tomorrow. Election Edge. It's getting closer to the debate. We'll have more analysis tomorrow. Look forward to seeing you then. Thanks for viewing today.